right, team. Thank you guys again. Now, this is going to be a video that's a little different. Of course, we're going through Gebser, but I don't want to just. There are other people out there besides Sean Gebser, and I have other topics that I want to speak on. So, interspliced with the Gebser videos, I want to talk about other subjects and my other thoughts. Now, if you see me looking sort of across, it's because I'm looking at the screen or I'm looking at my notes. But what this video is going to be about is why postmodernity is wrong. And I'm comfortable defending the use of that term, as you will see. Now, of course, if you're a real postmodernist, right and wrong mean nothing. These are socially constructed categories that have no correspondence to reality, and they're embedded with a bunch of social meaning, and they're just acted as if they are real or true, but they're not actually real or wrong. So we're going to be going into it. Now, I only have about 20-25 minutes before I have to get ready for work. So I'm going to try to be swift with this. Now, I do want to give a shout out to James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. They wrote a book called Cynical Theories, which is really, really a good book that goes through postmodernity and all that stuff. Now, there are two central claims to postmodernity. Postmodernity being a philosophical thought or school built from the French. The French always like to deconstruct. Of course, the French Revolution, the atheists, and they completely deconstructed everything, and we saw how that went. But there are two central claims to postmodernity. Number one is the knowledge principle, and number two is the political principle. Now, the knowledge principle is that all knowledge is a social construct in lieu of power. And we're going to be talking about epistemology. And epistemology is a fancy philosophical word to communicate the idea of the study of knowledge. What does it mean to know something? What does it mean to not know something? What separates knowledge from a belief or an opinion or a notion? What processes, what methods do we deploy to attain knowledge of the world? So we'll get right into it. The knowledge principle of postmodernity is that all knowledge is a social construct in lieu of power. So let's take the sun, for example. It's not that the sun is socially constructed. The sun is there. It's any attainment of knowledge, any attempt to attain knowledge of the sun is socially constructed. Why is it a social construct? Because the postmodernists believe when you say, I have knowledge of the sun, they will ask why, like a little 5-year-old child, and then eventually they believe that you will ultimately refer back to a meta-narrative, and a meta-narrative is a large, all-encompassing story, narrative, that legitimizes all notions of right and wrong, false and correct, true, incorrect, and ethical considerations. It affirms all knowledge claims. But of course, the postmodernists believe a meta-narrative is just a story we tell ourselves. We'll get there. Let's see. And then why? So it's a social construct, right? Because we've created a story that acts as the foundation of knowledge, the basis of knowledge that we can springboard off of to attain knowledge of the sun. That's a meta-narrative. It's a big, giant story. The scientific method, the postmodernists would claim, is a meta-narrative. It's not out here. We created things like logic. We created things like the concept of evidence, the concept of logic, the concept of reason, the concept of whatever that we use to attain knowledge of the external world. Why is it in lieu of power? Because when you are constructing one knowledge system, let's say evidence, you are necessarily precluding all other knowledge systems. So think of it like a classic economic trade-off. Got $5. I'm going to buy a bag of Doritos for $5. I am trading off literally every single other thing that I could buy for $5 in this world because I want the Dorito. That's what they view the meta-narrative as. You have one, that's fine, but now you've precluded all the other possibilities. So as a social construct, because they believe when pushed, the modernists will ultimately refer back to a meta-narrative, which is not real. It's just a story we make up according to them. Number two, it is in lieu of power because you are precluding other ways of knowing. If you've heard that phrase, other ways of knowing, you're dealing with the postmodernists. Now let's get to the political principle. So the way this manifests, the way the knowledge principle manifests in the world is the construction of epistemes, I believe, as Foucault calls them now. Epistemes, of course, the root being epistemology. These are anonymous knowledge zones. So in the West, in America, we have we have logic, we have evidence, we have rationality, essentially. And then in another part of the world, there might be, and rationality is the thing that sort of confers correctness on claims. That's right, That's wrong. How do I know? Logic, evidence, science, whatever, right? There's a particular cultural bias. A particular culture constructs meta-narratives that are different from meta-narratives that are constructed by other cultures. But the postmodernists are saying, look, none of these are better than the other. They're both just stories. They're all kind of relative. So we have epistemes, and we have institutions that form that mark off what can be right, what can be wrong, what is true, what is false. So in economics, you have certain things that are true, and you have other things that are crazy or wrong or absurd. In politics, we have certain beliefs that are true and right, and others that are insane or crazy. Same thing with science. If you start going into a science class and start giving some mythological or rational nonsense, they're going to laugh you out the building. They're going to call you crazy. But of course, if you're a postmodernist proper, you're not crazy. You're on the same level as them because you are just using a different meta narrative that's no better or worse than the one the other person's using. So no, I'm not crazy. What the postmodernists believe. So all words that symbolize or signify affirmative claims, right and wrong, true and false, correct and incorrect, crazy, normal, all claims are socially constructed and then assigned with or socialized assigned with social significance. So you would be crazy, so to speak, to not believe that the earth revolves around the sun, or you would be crazy to not believe that A is A and not A and B at the same time. So the epistemological foundations, the knowledge foundations, let me get some light in here, the knowledge foundations that underlie literally every claim in this world, in America, we'll say, every claim. Freedom of speech is a good thing. I like the color blue more than red. Anything. It's not actually true. It's not actually real. It doesn't actually correspond to reality. It's a social construct in lieu of power. Now, the postmodernists believe those who act within those constructs are under, what do they call it, false consciousness. They don't realize that they are working with social constructs. They believe that they are dealing with the truth, the objective truth. But according to the postmodernists, they are not. Now, let's refute these claims, shall we? The knowledge principle, again, all knowledge is a social construct in lieu of power. You know how I can refute this right here, right now, in front of all of you? Watch this. Ready? You have to watch. I refute it thus. Thank you, Dr. Michael Shagru. I do not need to talk about the table to hit the table. And if I hit the table, I have deployed experiential knowledge to know that the table exists objectively. I did not speak to anyone. I did not communicate with anyone. There is no social construction here. There's no talking. There's no hand gestures. There's nothing. Done. There's your entire claim refuted right then and there. But we'll keep going. So that's number one. You can disprove postmodernity literally at any time. As long as you are around a physical object, you can disprove it. Just shut up and hit the thing. I refute it thus. There you go. So let's be clear what's happening here. I hit the desk. Social construction, the knowledge by social construction is estimative knowledge. It's theoretical knowledge. We have the concept of logic, the idea of evidence, the idea of whatever you want to do, mathematics, scientific method. But the problem is they've only sectored off one half of the knowledge process. They've done it up here. They've stayed up here in the mind where we're constructing these things socially and then externalizing them. But they don't leave room for experiential knowledge, intuitive knowledge, intuition being defined as knowledge derived from direct experience. And that, my friend, destroys their claim because you can do that silently. You can do that by yourself. You could be plopped into Mars with no one else around you for planets away, and you could still refute that claim. It's absurd. So, as I just said, the meta narratives, right, stay in the world of theory. They stay up here. They're narratives, right? They can't be found in my mouse, right? They can't be found in my laptop. The empirical privileges out there. So the meta narratives stay in here. The empirical privileges out there. Postmodernity, with the idea of knowledge as a social construction, believes all knowledge can only be produced up here. That is not true. I don't know if you've noticed, but if I go back 40,000 years, we didn't exactly have a bunch of logic or evidence or charts running around. And yet people still knew how to get food and how to drink. They had experiential knowledge, knowledge derived from direct experience that privileges the empirical, the objective, rather than the socially constructed subjective. So the scientific method, capitalism, Jean Gebser's evolution of consciousness, they derive these as meta-narratives, large stories that legitimate all notions of right and wrong, good and bad, all that stuff. They are wrong. They are self-skeptical systems that privilege empirical evidence rather than staying in the world of pure theory. Okay, science does not stay in the world of pure theory. Its basis, the knowledge basis of science, is empirical observation, and as I just demonstrated, that can be done silently, individually, completely devoid of social construction. So, of course, we do have scientific theories, but they don't just stay there. Good science doesn't just stay up here. It gets externalized out here, and it must, because these aren't really opposites. Estimative knowledge, theoretical knowledge, and empirical knowledge or experiential knowledge, these are not antithetical opposites, my friend. That's bullshit rationalism. These are corresponding complements. One cannot theorize unless one has the sense coming in from the external world, and theoretical knowledge means nothing without any sort of externalization or empirical verification. So these two work together. The postmodernists, being rationalists, they view them as dualistic opposites and privilege one or the other, and of course theoretically. They are wrong. Same thing with capitalism. Same thing with math. Same thing with engineering. These are self-skeptical systems that privilege the empirical, not just the theoretical, though it does incorporate the theoretical, because you have to have that. But the meta-narratives only stay in the theoretical. And if they believe that that's the true source of all knowledge, well, there you go. So two big things. One, the desk, and two, they wrongly classify the scientific method, capitalism, engineering, stuff like that, the epistemology of science. They wrongly identify that or categorize that as a meta-narrative when it in truth is a self-skeptical system that privileges the empirical and the objective, not the subjective theoretical. What else we got? Okay, let's see. Okay, if postmodernity claims that there are no meta-narratives that can legitimize all notions of right and wrong, good and evil, bad and good, correct and incorrect, no, I just found one that did, and that's postmodernity. That in turn, the narrative that there is no narrative becomes the narrative. So the postmodernists claim that no meta-narrative can legitimize all these claims is self-refuted by postmodernity, because that itself is a meta-narrative that legitimizes all these claims. So there you go. 4, if all knowledge is a social construct, not only do I not have to do anything you have to say, because if it's all just a relativized social construct, well, okay, I'm going to privilege my own beliefs rather than you, right? Why do I have to listen to what you have to say? Not only do I not have to do that, I'm actively disincentivized not to. If I were to accept the Foucault power knowledge structure, what I would be doing is accepting, now he was a homosexual man, I would be accepting I don't know what you would call it, the white male homosexual knowledge structure power system. You will always be able to, so the postmodernists believe we're all swimming in the waters created by the founding fathers. If all knowledge is a social construct and we live in America, let's say, well, let's go back to the absolute origin of America and we'll see what's happening. So the founding fathers were straight white men. They created things like logic, evidence, liberal rights, all that stuff, assigned it with a bunch of meaning, and then they reified it. They lived it out. So this is things aren't actually true. They are only true for the straight white male social construction. But there might be other identities like African Americans or Mexicans or Asians that have constructed their own epistemological processes that do not have to be subsumed into the straight white male knowledge structure system. So if the straight white male essentially was the first one to invent or create science, the scientific method, then we're all a slave to his power knowledge structure. But if I were to do that to Foucault, we'll say, well, I would just be doing the same thing. I would just be accepting, if I'm a straight white male, which I am, why would I accept the homosexual white male power knowledge structure? If all knowledge is power, and if a white man or any identity characteristic creates a knowledge claim, it can only be true for that identity, for the straight white man. Um, it cannot really be true for any one of the other identities. So why would I listen to Foucault? It makes no sense. I'd be accepting his power knowledge structure. Um, and there you go. So that's the two big refutation, or three or four big refutations of the knowledge principle, which is wrong. Again, now postmodernists would say you're missing the point. Right and wrong are social constructions in lieu of power. So no, they're not wrong, or if they are, it doesn't mean anything. That's only true if I were to agree with your presuppositions, but I just deconstructed your presuppositions and prove that they're wrong. So no, not all knowledge is socially constructed, or not all claims of wrong are just social constructs in lieu of power. No, that's only true if I were to agree with the two postmodernist principles, which I don't. I just explained that they're wrong. Now we'll do the political principle. Now the political principle, like I said, they have an idea of singular causation. So we have the straight white males who founded the country. They set the knowledge structures. They are the ones who marked off originally what is true, what is false, what is right, what is wrong. This is how we work. We do liberalism, we do evidence, we do reason, we do all this stuff. And of course, we still have this in America. Foucault would say, like I said earlier, we're all slaves to this system. Um, Evidence, American exceptionalism, logic, science, these are all the social constructions of the straight white male. And of course, America is not populated by exclusively straight white males. So anyone who's outside that group is necessarily living in an oppressive social structure. Problem, big problem. They don't understand causation. This is not singular causation, my friend. This is systemic causation, and systemic causation can be understood best. And you very rarely will you hear me quoting this person in sincerity and without any sort of pretense or derision. But Joseph Engels, or Friedrich Engels, excuse me, who was the co-writer of the Communist Manifesto, of course. I think he had a line, and of course I'm stealing this from Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, where he said, what is willed by another is obstructed by the will. Oh, excuse me. Let me back up. What is willed by one is obstructed by the will of another, and what results is something that no one willed. That's systemic causation, my friend. That is systemic causation. What is willed by one is obstructed by the will of another, and what produces or results is something that no one willed. So when I'm in a system, the end result of the systemic processes will be influenced, manipulated, and changed by the system itself. For example, take the Dow Jones. Let's say the Dow Jones lands on 17,187 for the day. The individual stock traders were responsible for the Dow Jones ending on 17,187, even if none of them intended it for it to land on that number. The system, the economic system of stock trading means that what was willed by one is obstructed by the will of the other. And then what happens, the 17,000, no one really planned this, but yet it resulted anyways because it's a systemic process. No one invented the English language. The English language was invented by a series of utterances, noises, sounds, whatever you want to call it. No one sat down and invented this stuff. It was a systemic process. So it's not really true that all these institutions are necessarily um, swimming in the waters created by straight white men. No, these are systemic processes. And when you involve people of other identities, well, then what's willed by the straight white man is obstructed by the will of either the system or other people of other identities in that system. And then what emerges is someone that no one really wanted, but yet we deal with anyways. So yeah, postmodernity is an absolutely terrible philosophy. It is wrong. It is stupid. It is destructive. It is pseudo-intellectual. It is little more than a bunch of 105 midwits who decide that they want to be smart and to themselves and to the world that they can just deconstruct everything. The problem is they don't realize that I can use that tool against you as well. And they don't like that. They don't like it when you start to deconstruct their nonsense. So, like, for example, I can't remember who did it, but there was some woman who made a video about Derrida or Foucault, and she was responding to another person who was criticizing Derrida or Foucault, who are both, of course, postmodernists. And she said, well, Derrida didn't actually write that, so she went back into the book and she said, "Yeah, Derrida didn't write that. Look, page 23. Yeah, he didn't say that. You said quote A, he said quote B. So no, that's not true." I'm sorry. I thought empirical verification. I thought checking the primary source. I thought that was a social construct in lieu of power. And not only that, I thought it was a straight white male social construct in lieu of power that is oppressive. So why in the world are you appealing to it now to disprove the other guy's claim? No, I don't have to accept that. What I would say to that woman is, I don't need empirical verification because that's a social construct in lieu of power. For example, how about this? I could accuse you, the audience, of the most heinous crime. I could accuse you of being you inappropriately engage with my child. I think everyone knows what I'm referencing. I don't want to get in trouble. You inappropriately engage with my child. I accuse you of that. Now, I challenge you under the postmodernist knowledge principle, disprove that theory. So you would say, well, simply put, I've never done that in reality. I have never done that. I don't even know your child. I've never met you outside of the internet. So I'm sorry, but it just didn't happen. There's no correspondence to reality there. What I would say, if I was a postmodernist, I would say, yeah, but that's a social construct in lieu of power. And I have other ways of knowing that are more emotional and intuitive. So in reality, you really did. You really did. I know that you did because inside I felt it. Take this seriously. People sincerely take this seriously and act as if we should. They did for 50 years. They acted under that precept that all knowledge is social construction. So I don't have to actually do anything. I could just do whatever I want because no matter what, when someone provides me to legitimize my claim, I could just appeal to whatever I want, and no one can prove me wrong on anything. You can see why the era of postmodernity was so destructive and terrible for the world, or at least for the country. So yeah, postmodernity is wrong. It's terrible philosophy. The two principal claims that it makes are easily refuted, as I just did, and Foucault is a pseudo-intellectual who decided to write a 3-volume history of sexuality, and not once, or barely once, did he mention women. Imagine writing a 3-volume history of sexuality, and you don't mention women. That signals to me, as Michael Chagru reminds me, that you have a guilty conscience. That signals to me that if I were to make the claim that only women um, can give birth, we'll say, of course, Foucault would say that's a socially constructed knowledge and that's not actually true, right? Okay, but if I go back 50,000, 60,000 years, we don't have all these epistemological systems, and yet women were giving birth. It was empirically verified through empirical, through the senses. I directly engage with it as an experience. But he doesn't want to get into that because he knows if he goes too far back, they're going to say, "Oh, wow, maybe women do biologically. Maybe biology has a strong correspondence to reality, and maybe scientific claims on the world aren't subjective and they are objective." But of course, he doesn't want to do that because he's just a pseudo-intellectual postmodernist. So maybe I'll do a part 2 to this, a part 3 to this. I cannot stand the postmodernity. This is by the way, when you hear deconstruction and my truth, that's what this is. That is where all this is coming from, and it is absurd. I am tired of people letting these morons, these pseudo-intellectual midwits, walk around and ruin society because we either don't have the courage or the intelligence to refute them. I have both, and I will destroy all of you. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best. If you guys want to hear me talk about something else, just get into the comments. And be safe, man. Be safe. I love you guys. See you soon.